Imagine your dream startup. You are walking into this really sleek, sunlit office.
Right, absolute freedom.
Yeah, absolute freedom. You answer to absolutely no one. But now why don't you just take a second and look around that imaginary office?
Yeah.
Because statistically, like 9 out of 10 of the people sitting next to you.
They're gone.
Exactly. They are going to lose their life savings in the next 2 years. Welcome to the deep dive.
I mean, it is a brutal metric to open with.
It really is.
But if you want to actually survive that transition, from being an employee to a founder, you have to look that 90% failure rate directly in the eye.
Yeah.
Because that number isn't just some statistical anomaly. It represents millions of highly intelligent, incredibly driven people who basically stepped off a ledge because they misunderstood the fundamental mechanics of what a startup actually demands.
Demands of human psychology specifically.
Right, exactly.
Which is really the core mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We are breaking down Pankaj Goyal's analysis in his book, Before You Startup.
And we should clarify, this isn't about business plans, right? Or like venture capital metrics.
No, not at all. This is basically a surgical audit of the founder's mind. Goyal's whole premise is that people spend, months analyzing their market and 0 days analyzing their own psychological readiness.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. So today, we are going to strip away the glossy hustle culture mythology and examine the gritty, honestly, often highly toxic realities of building something from nothing.
Yeah, the premise here is that business failure is rarely just a spreadsheet problem.
Right.
It is almost always a psychological collapse that is sort of disguised as a spreadsheet problem. Because if you look at the foundation of any enterprise, it rests entirely on the cognitive endurance of the founder.
Well, that's a good way to put it, cognitive endurance.
Right, and if that foundation has hairline fractures like unexamined motives or a fragile ego or hidden anxieties, the pressure of the market will just split the building in half.
So let's test that foundation right now, starting with what Goyal frames as the sacrifice audit.
Yes, the sacrifice audit.
And this is where I actually want to push back on the prevailing narrative a little bit. We constantly hear about the 14 to 16-hour workday for early founders.
Right, the classic hustle.
Yeah, but if you're listening to this, you probably already work long hours. You know how to pull a late shift.
Yep.
So what is actually fundamentally different about a 16-hour founder day versus just a grueling corporate week?
Yeah.
I mean, are we just glorifying burnout here?
Well, it's easy to view it as glorified burnout if you only look at the sheer number of hours. But the critical difference lies in the cognitive load.
The cognitive load. Okay, unpack that.
So in a corporate environment, even during a crazy 60-hour week, there is this invisible safety net. Your tasks are somewhat defined. You have a manager, you have a legal department, you have an IT guy who fixes your server when it crashes.
Right, you're part of a machine.
Exactly. But a 16-hour founder day means you are the IT guy, the legal department, the visionary, and honestly, the janitor.
Yeah, taking out the trash at 2 a.m.
Right. You aren't just executing tasks. You are constantly context switching between high-level strategy and microscopic administrative crises. And the neurobiological toll of making hundreds of micro decisions without any safety net, that is what actually burns people out, not just the lack of sleep.
Because you are operating in this state of, permanent hypervigilance.
Yes.
There is no off switch, because the off switch implies someone else is steering the ship.
Yeah.
And the sacrifice audit isn't just about time, right? It's a radical restructuring of your physical reality.
Oh, absolutely. The lifestyle drop.
The lifestyle drop. Goyal discusses this, and this is where it gets incredibly visceral. If you are listening to this right now, maybe on your commute, ask yourself, are you willing to sell the car you were sitting in to fund a server upgrade?
Yeah, that's the real question.
Because the transition from corporate comfort to bootstrapping isn't just, skipping your morning latte. It is a profound, aggressive downgrade in your quality of life.
And we have to look at the psychology of identity that is tied to that lifestyle drop. In a successful corporate career, your ego and your identity are heavily subsidized by your environment.
Subsidized by your environment. I like that.
Yeah, think about it. You fly business class, you stay in 5-star hotels, you expense these really expensive dinners with clients. Your brain processes all these perks as markers of social status and competence.
Right, you feel like you've made it.
Exactly. But when you start a company, you are suddenly taking a 14-hour train ride just to save $90. You are cooking simple meals like rice and beans at home or staying in a cheap guest house, all while watching your former colleagues post vacation photos.
Oh, that's rough. Just watching them get promoted, buy new cars.
It is, and the brain actually processes this loss of status similarly to social rejection. It triggers genuine neurological distress.
Which makes total sense when you factor in the external pressures. Because you aren't suffering in a vacuum. You are suffering under a microscope.
A very judgmental microscope.
Yeah, Goyal highlights the immense societal and family pressure. He specifically references the cultural trope of Sharmaji's son.
Right, the perfect kid next door who did everything right.
Exactly. It's this universal, crushing weight of parental and societal comparison. You left a high-paying, secure job, you are bleeding through your savings, and your extended family is constantly asking, often with this thinly veiled pity, why would you throw your life away? Look at how well Sharmaji's son who went to America is doing.
And that subtle pity is far more destructive than outright criticism.
Really? No, so?
Because it erodes your conviction. When you are alone at 2 a.m. looking at a product that just keeps crashing, that chorus of voices, the skepticism of your parents, the confusion of your peers, it just gets amplified.
It creates this massive cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. You have to actively fight the urge to seek the immediate validation of returning to a normal job, just to make the questioning stop.
But returning to that normal job brings up its own nightmare scenario, which is the career security fear.
The stigma.
Right, the stigma of the failed founder. I think a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs harbor this secret terror. Like, if I fail, and statistics dictate I probably will, is my resume ruined?
Will corporate recruiters see me as damaged goods?
Yeah, or as a rogue agent who just can no longer take orders.
And that fear of permanent career damage is precisely why people hesitate. And frankly, it's why many should hesitate.
Interesting. So you're saying it's a good filter?
A vital stress test, acknowledging that fear is not a sign of weakness, it is maturity. If you cannot stomach the thought of going back to the corporate world in 2 years and sitting across from a hiring manager to explain a failure, then you do not have the risk tolerance required for this journey.
You have to reach a point where the terror of never trying outweighs the potential embarrassment of a very public failure.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like modern startup culture is this glamorous Instagram filter, and this checklist is the unedited, messy, behind-the-scenes footage. We tend to talk about the leap into entrepreneurship using all these heroic metaphors. But it's not like signing up for an Ironman thinking it's a 5K fun run.
No, it's not.
It's more like saturation diving.
Yeah.
You are descending into an environment where the pressure will literally crush you if you haven't meticulously prepared your equipment and your mind.
The saturation diving analogy perfectly captures the isolation and the pressure. And what keeps a diver calm in the abyss is their training and their underlying motivation.
Right. Why are they down there in the first place?
Exactly. Which brings us to Goyal's next massive psychological hurdle, the why test, identifying your internal motivation. Because it turns out the vast majority of people are operating on highly combustible but incredibly weak fuel.
Okay, let's categorize that fuel. Goyal explicitly calls out motivations that will inevitably leave you stranded. Wanting to get rich quickly, escaping a micromanaging boss, or just the incredibly vague desire to do something different.
Right.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Spite is a highly documented, incredibly powerful human emotion. I mean, look at half of the great art or business empires in history. A lot of them started because someone wanted to prove a detractor wrong.
Sure.
So is escaping a bad boss or wanting to prove someone wrong really that terrible of a motivator to get you out the door on day one?
Well, spite is fantastic for ignition. It acts like a lightning strike. It will give you the surge of adrenaline required to draft your resignation letter, register an LLC, and work through the first 3 weekends.
Right.
But a lightning strike cannot power a city for a decade. The mechanical failure of spite as a long-term motivator is that it is inherently backward-looking. You are running away from something.
Oh, I see.
But building a startup requires you to run towards something with just obsessive focus. And furthermore, if your goal is escaping a boss, you fundamentally misunderstand the ecosystem you are entering.
Because you're trading one boss for dozens.
Exactly. As a founder, you don't eliminate your boss. You multiply them. Every single customer, every angel investor, every shifting market trend, they all become your relentless, demanding manager.
So if you are running from a tyrant, you are just running into a mob.
It's a great way to put it.
So if spite and money are weak fuels, what constitutes the high-octane fuel? Goyal points to entirely externalized, purpose-driven anchors.
Yes.
Like a burning, almost irrational desire to solve a very specific problem, creating a positive societal change. Or just a genuine passion for the mechanics of your field, making your customers' lives significantly easier.
Notice the shift in orientation there. Weak motivations are internal and ego-driven. It's about my wealth, my freedom, my status.
Right.
But strong motivations are external and utility-driven. It's about the customer's problem, the world's lack of this specific technology. When the motivation is externalized, your ego is removed from the blast radius.
What do you mean by blast radius?
Well, when the market rejects your product on day 100, an ego-driven founder takes it as a personal attack and they quit. A purpose-driven founder views it as just a data point indicating the problem hasn't been solved yet, and they iterate.
That makes a lot of sense. And to figure out which camp you fall into, Goyal presents this acid test for your motivation. It consists of 3 brutal, illuminating questions.
The acid test.
Yes. Number 1, would you do this work without pay? Number 2, can you sustain this specific effort for 5 to 10 years? And number 3, Can you push forward without any external validation, meaning fame, money, no one ever knowing your name?
That third question is the real psychological tripwire.
Yeah.
Because modern culture has conflated the identity of being a founder with the labor of being a founder. People just want to update their LinkedIn bio to CEO. They want the social cachet.
Right, the aesthetic.
Exactly. If you remove the audience, if you remove the applause, does the work still matter to you? If the answer is no, you are seeking a performance, not a company.
And to dig past that performance, Goyal introduces a brilliant tool borrowed from root cause analysis, the 5 Whys framework.
This is such a powerful exercise.
It sounds deceptively simple, but I actually want to try this live right now. Let's role play this, because it shows how quickly things get uncomfortable when you strip away the rehearsed pitch.
Okay, let's do it.
I'll be the prospective founder. I want to build a new logistics software company.
Why do you want to build a logistics software company?
Well, because the current supply chain software is outdated and slow, and I know I can build a faster interface.
Okay, but why does it matter to you that you build a faster interface?
Because if it's faster, companies will buy it, and I can capture a large market share and build a highly profitable business.
Sure, but why is building a highly profitable business in logistics your ultimate goal?
Well, because I've spent 10 years in logistics making other people rich, and I want financial independence. I want to control my own time and resources.
Why is controlling your own time and resources through this specific vehicle so important that you are willing to risk bankruptcy for it?
Because, I feel like if I don't build something of my own, my entire career will have been spent just being a cog in someone else's machine. I want to prove I can build the machine.
And there we hit the bedrock.
Wow. Yeah.
3 minutes ago, we were talking about software interfaces. Now we are talking about a deep-seated existential fear of mediocrity and a desire for autonomy.
It's confronting.
The 5 Whys systematically strips away the intellectualized business logic to expose the raw emotional driver. And if that emotional driver, in this case, proving self-worth and escaping the cog mentality, isn't strong enough to endure severe trauma, the startup will die.
It is incredibly confronting.
Yeah.
But you look at the historical case studies Goyal cites, and you see this bedrock clearly. Like Steve Jobs.
Right.
It is well documented that his primary driver wasn't accumulating wealth. It was a fanatical, uncompromising desire to merge technology with beautiful, intuitive design. He wanted to bring great tech to the world.
And that profound why is what allowed Jobs to survive being ousted from his own company, to navigate the wilderness of NXT and to eventually return to Apple.
Exactly. Or consider Elon Musk.
Yeah, look at SpaceX.
Regardless of public opinion on his persona, the stated motivation wasn't to build a profitable rocket company. It was to make humanity a multiplanetary species, to make things sustainable.
You do not survive multiple catastrophic rocket explosions that push you to the brink of personal bankruptcy if your goal is just to make money. You only survive that if your motivation operates on a civilizational scale.
And Goyal also brings in Narayana Murthy, the founder of Infosys.
Yes. His drive was to prove that India could build a world-class, highly ethical IT company. It was an issue of national pride and capability.
So let's assume you're listening and you have survived this psychological gauntlet. You've passed the sacrifice audit, you've done the 5 Whys, and you have an unshakable externalized purpose.
You draft the resignation letter.
Absolutely not. This brings us to what might be the most crucial, pragmatic section of Goyal's analysis, the don't quit yet checklist.
Yes.
Quitting your job without this checklist is like jumping out of an airplane and trying to sew your parachute on the way down.
Yeah.
You need the parachute packed before you jump.
That is a perfect analogy, because premature quitting is an absolute epidemic in the startup world.
Why do you think that is?
Well, people mistake the emotional clarity of finding their why for practical readiness. They leap, assuming the net will appear.
But the net does not appear.
The market does not care about your emotional clarity at all. The checklist Goyal provides is a series of 5 non-negotiable hurdles you must clear while still drawing a salary.
Okay, let's walk through them. Requirement number 1 is the financial runway. The mandate is 6 to 12 months of personal living expenses saved up.
In liquid cash, not business capital, survival capital.
And I really want to dig into the math and psychology of this. Why 12 months? Why not, say, 3 months?
Let's look at the mechanism of panic. If you have 3 months of runway, by week 4, your brain realizes the countdown is already a third of the way finished. You are officially on the clock.
So you start stressing immediately.
Exactly. Financial starvation in a startup causes what we can call cognitive myopia. You lose the ability to see long-term strategy because you are solely focused on short-term survival.
So you start making desperate decisions.
Right. You start offering massive discounts just to get cash in the door. You take on a toxic client who demands custom features, which effectively turns your scalable software startup into a stressed-out consulting firm. You pivot out of panic, not data.
Wow.
A 12-month runway acts as an emotional buffer. It buys you the psychological space to say no to bad money.
That makes the concept of a financial cushion so much more real. It's not just about survival math. It's a measure of your strategic freedom. It prevents short-sighted business decisions. Moving to requirement 2. You must have a minimum viable product, an MVP, already launched and tested. Now, the term MVP is thrown around constantly, kind of to the point of losing its meaning. People think an MVP means a broken, buggy piece of garbage.
Yeah, the definition of an MVP has definitely suffered from semantic satiation. Let's clarify what Goyal actually means here. An MVP is not a shoddy product.
Okay.
It is the smallest possible experiment required to validate or invalidate your core hypothesis. If your hypothesis is that people want a marketplace for vintage watches, your MVP is not a fully coded app with an AI recommendation engine.
Right.
Your MVP might be a simple Instagram page where you manually connect buyers and sellers via direct message. It must be functional enough to deliver the core value proposition, but stripped of all secondary features.
Which flows directly into requirement number 3, initial traction.
Yeah.
You cannot quit your job based on a survey where your friend said, oh yeah, I totally use that.
Never.
You need early customers or pre-orders validating demand. You need strangers handing you their credit cards.
And this touches on a fascinating behavioral economics concept, the difference between stated preference and revealed preference.
Oh, I love this. Explain that.
When you ask people if they like your idea, social cohesion kicks in. They want to be polite. They will give you false positive validation. Yes, I would definitely pay $50 a month for that.
But they won't.
Right, because the moment you actually ask them to enter their credit card details, the polite fiction evaporates. Revealed preference is what people actually do when resources are on the line. Traction means you have bypassed politeness and secured a transaction.
That is so key. Requirement 4 is the team foundation, having 2 to 3 core team members or a solid co-founder. And the source specifically warns against the classic trap: starting a company with your best friend who has the exact same background and skill set as you.
Yes.
Why is that a trap? Why is having someone with complementary skills, what you might call cognitive friction, so vital in a founding team?
Well, let's break down the psychology of the homogeneous founding team. Say 2 brilliant software engineers decide to start a company. They agree on everything. They code beautifully together. The product is pristine.
That's great so far.
But because they have identical domains of expertise, they have massive blind spots. Neither knows how to execute a go-to-market strategy. Neither knows how to read a cash flow statement.
Ah, I see.
And even worse, because their skills overlap perfectly, they inevitably clash over authority. Who makes the final call on the architecture? A robust founding team requires complementary skills and distinct domains of authority.
Right, you need the builder and the seller.
Exactly. You need the visionary product builder, and you need the pragmatic, ruthless operator who understands sales and operations. They should fundamentally view the world slightly differently. That friction, when managed with respect, prevents the company from driving off a cliff.
The puzzle pieces have to interlock. They can't just be stacked on top of each other.
Beautifully said.
Finally, requirement 5. A clear business and revenue model. It seems absurd to even have to state this, but you need to know exactly who the customer is, why they will pay, and how the business will make money.
The era of we will acquire users now and figure out how to monetize them in 5 years is largely dead.
Yeah, gone are the days.
Unless you have access to limitless venture capital, which most listeners do not, you must have a mechanism for capturing value from day one. If you cannot explain the unit economics, how much it costs to acquire a customer versus how much they pay you on a single napkin, you don't have a business model.
You have an expensive hobby.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's pause here, because the listener is probably looking at this checklist and seeing a massive paradox. You need an MVP, and
Yes.
you need paying customers before you quit your job.
Right.
Meaning you have to build and sell a product while working your 40 to 60-hour corporate job, using only your nights, weekends, and whatever spare change you have. How is that physically and financially possible without a massive budget?
It is possible through the art of the scrappy, ultra-lean launch, and this requires a complete recalibration of your ego. Most aspiring founders are perfectionists.
True.
They want to emerge from their garage after 2 years with a flawless, polished diamond to present to the world. Goyal's methodology demands the exact opposite. Start incredibly small, test rapidly, and do not wait for 100% perfection.
But wait, I have to challenge this logic. Every marketing textbook ever written says first impressions are everything.
Sure.
In a highly saturated, incredibly noisy market, if you release something bare bones and imperfect, aren't you risking your brand's reputation right out of the gate? Won't potential users see a basic interface and write you off forever?
That is the standard corporate fear, but it misunderstands the psychology of early adopters. We have to segment the market here.
Okay.
The mass market, your mainstream consumer, does indeed demand polish. But you are not selling to the mass market on day one. You are launching to a small, controlled group. Friends, select customers. Early adopters are wired differently. They are actively seeking out novel solutions to acute problems. If someone has a migraine, They don't care if the aspirin comes in a beautiful foil-stamped box. They just want the pain to stop.
That is a great point.
If your core mechanic solves their acute pain, they will forgive a clunky interface. It's the difference between a flawed core product and a basic but functional product. Furthermore, early adopters actually derive psychological value from being part of the messy development process. They like feeling like insiders who are helping shape a nascent product.
We want to be co-creators, not just consumers.
Exactly. Gather feedback immediately and iterate.
The examples Goyal provides of this bare-bones validation are legendary. Take Dropbox. Drew Houston realized that building a fully functional, cross-platform file syncing engine just to see if people wanted it would take years of complex coding.
Right. It was too massive an undertaking.
So he bypassed the code entirely. He recorded a simple screen capture video, narrated over it, and just demonstrated how the concept would work to gauge interest.
The Dropbox video is the masterpiece of the MVP concept. It was basically a simulation. But he posted it to a community of perfect early adopters, and the waiting list went crazy overnight. He validated the demand, secured the traction, and proved the hypothesis using a simple video that cost nothing to make.
Goyal also points to Zomato. They didn't start by building a complex restaurant aggregator app with geolocation and review algorithms.
No, they didn't.
They walked into restaurants, physically collected paper menus, scanned them, and put the JPEGs online. It was crude, but it solved the immediate pain point.
So you have your scanned menus or your demo video, you have your MVP. The next question is, how do you get those crucial early customers on a budget?
Right, without buying expensive ads. Goyal's strategy is incredibly focused. Ignore scale. Focus intensely on acquiring just the first 100 customers.
When you try to reach 1 million people, you have to use broad, expensive marketing. When you only need 100 people, you can use word of mouth, referrals, and community platforms, subreddits, core threads, LinkedIn groups.
You do things that do not scale.
Exactly. You don't spam them with ads. You engage in the conversation and organically introduce your solution. Creativity has to compensate for a lack of capital.
Look at Dollar Shave Club. They took down monolithic razor companies, not with traditional ad spend, but with a cheap, deadpan, incredibly witty viral video.
Yes.
Or look at Tesla utilizing Elon Musk's tweets instead of buying commercials. Or OnePlus. They entered a smartphone market dominated by giants. They had no marketing budget, so they created a limited, invite-only release. You couldn't just buy the phone, you had to be invited.
That is a masterclass in building hype. By making the product hard to get, they manufactured intense desire and turned early users into rabid evangelists.
So, against all odds, you've done it. You launched the MVP, you hacked your way to your first customers, and you finally quit your job. You've crossed the starting line. But Goyal warns that this is where the real test of survival begins. The first 12 months are an absolute crucible.
The first year is an exercise in brutal, relentless adaptation. The primary survival skill you need is what we might call radical customer listening.
Which means what, exactly?
When you launch, your product is basically a hypothesis colliding with reality. Reality will invariably reveal that you were wrong about several key assumptions, and the way you discover you were wrong isn't by just sending out a generic survey.
Right. Goyal specifically cites the early days of Zappos. The founders didn't hide behind dashboards. They picked up the telephone and personally called their first 100 customers.
Let's distinguish between defensive and offensive feedback loops. A survey is defensive. It limits their responses to the questions you had the foresight to ask. Picking up the phone is offensive and highly vulnerable.
Because you hear the unvarnished truth.
You hear the hesitation in their voice when you ask about pricing. You hear their frustration. That qualitative, unstructured data is the lifeblood of a first-year startup. It's how you utilize feedback for rapid improvement.
But getting that feedback leads to a really painful moment. What do you do when the data shows that your original plan isn't working? This brings us to the pivot. Adapting the business model.
The pivot requires the ultimate ego death.
Ego death. Tell me about that.
You have spent a year falling in love with your solution, but if the data shows that users are ignoring your flagship feature, you have to let go of your ego. If you stubbornly insist that the market just doesn't get it yet, you will bleed out your runway and die. Flexibility is a superpower.
The history of tech is essentially a history of successful pivots, like YouTube. Goyal reminds us that it originally started as a video dating site.
Right. Think about the psychological friction there. They built matchmaking algorithms, and users completely ignored it. People just used the platform to upload random videos of themselves.
So instead of forcing the dating paradigm, they changed it based on data.
Exactly. Instagram is another chaotic story. It was originally a location-sharing app called Bourbon. It had check-ins, gaming elements, a photo feature. It was a mess.
But the founders noticed people were obsessively using the photo filters.
So they took a machete to 90% of the code base. They cut away everything except the photo sharing. They pivoted based on harsh market feedback.
It sounds like a startup isn't a sculpture you carve from stone, where one mistake ruins it. It's more like steering a ship. You are constantly adjusting the wheel based on the wind and the waves.
That psychological agility is required here. It's a delicate balance between having unwavering faith in your core why while remaining completely ruthless about killing off features that the market rejects.
And you cannot maintain that agility without the final element Goyal outlines: financial discipline and long-term grit.
Money burns fast in the first 6 months. Continuous learning and extreme discipline are non-negotiable.
Keep expenses low, avoid flashy offices, and don't pay yourself a massive salary early on.
Goyal points to companies like Zoho and Zerodha. They grew massively through slow, deliberate bootstrapping and financial discipline. They didn't blow money on vanity metrics.
So to briefly recap this incredible journey, we started by taking the psychological reality check.
Right.
Then we passed the why test. We completed the pre-quit checklist. We launched the scrappy MVP, and we pivoted based on harsh market feedback.
It is a formidable gauntlet, but by forcing yourself through this checklist, you are fundamentally de-risking your leap.
And that leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to carry into the rest of your day. We've spent this entire deep dive using these frameworks to analyze starting a new business. But I challenge you to take that 5 whys framework and apply it to your current life right now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Look at your current 9-to-5 job. Are you staying in that comfortable corporate role for the right reasons? Or are you just afraid of the checklist? Because even if you never start a business, adopting a founder's mindset, relentless problem-solving, financial discipline, and adapting to feedback will make you unstoppable in whatever path you choose.
That is the ultimate takeaway.
Absolutely. The only question left is, do you have the checklist to survive the dive?